Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, Parler, and Instagram. And of course, be sure to visit www.mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
We will hear arguments in Roe against Wade. You may proceed.
If you really want to know how abortion became legal in our country, I will tell you the true story.
Dr. Mildred Jefferson, would you like to head up a Right to Life group that I'm starting?
Dr. Bernard Nathanson's clinics are performing 1,000 abortions per week. That's why I'm taking up the fight.
I wanted to get abortion legalized across the country.
We're looking for a pregnant girl to challenge the abortion laws.
We'll give her a pseudonym. Call her Jane Roe.
It's genius that way no one will ever know about her past.
First, they came after the Jews, and then they came after the mentally deficient. We did nothing. And now they're coming after the unborn. And so you're gonna do nothing?
Robert Byrd for Henry Wade.
No judge or jury in their right mind would ever let abortion happen in Texas.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 336. Releasing April 2nd on digital is Roe v. Wade, a historical drama that delves into the players, the shrewd tactics, and the unknown facts that led to the Supreme Court decision to legalize abortion in the United States. A film that exposes little-known truths and features a cast that includes Jon Voight, Corbin Bernsen, Jamie Kennedy, and many more recognizable names. Roe v. Wade is a film sure to stir many emotions and illuminate many minds. And joining me now on the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is the co-director and star of Roe v. Wade, Nick Loeb. Nick, I thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, look, the first question I've got to ask is that the issue of abortion is an incredibly divisive one. Roe v. Wade, clearly a monumental event in regards to that subject. Yet you decided to make a film about it. And what is it about this issue, that event, that really drove you not only to make the film, but you dedicated 4 years of your life to a movie that I'm sure you knew you receive a lot of kind of hate for from your industry and maybe from people outside the industry as well. What was it about the issue, the subject, that court case that really drove you to make this movie?
Well, I think it was a culmination of a lot of things. I think, one, it's the most famous court case in U.S. history, and no one's made a real Hollywood movie. There was a made-for-TV movie in the 80s, but it had nothing to really do with the case at all. It was sort of it was based on one of the characters who really wasn't even involved. And so I just, Hollywood makes movies on everything. And so I couldn't believe no one had made a movie on the most famous court case in U.S. history.
Yep.
And the most controversial court case in U.S. history. Yep. And every American's heard of it, but no American really knows about it, which is interesting. I mean, everybody knows that Roe v. Wade was a court case that legalized or gave women the right to have an abortion, but no one has any idea about it and how it got decided, how it got heard, who decided what or anything. And when I started to look into it, I realized it was fascinating because it wasn't just sort of a straightforward black and white thing. There was a lot of conspiracy. There was a lot of manipulation. There was a lot of, it almost was like an Oliver Stone-esque JFK movie.
Yep.
And for me as an entertainer, I found that to be, exciting as well and entertaining. So not only could I tell the most famous court case in American history, but I could also do it in a way that was fun and exciting.
So the interesting thing about your movie is that, as you said, it talks about the facts of this movement that really led to this court case ruling. And you mentioned before the films of Oliver Stone. I think in a more kind of contemporary standard, you can also talk about the films of Adam McKay, what he did with The Big Short and Vice as well, in that you're weaving kind of these fact-based things into a narrative feature. I'd imagine that'll be very difficult though, because consider it is a narrative feature. You deal with dialogue, you're dealing with characters as well. You're making a drama as much as you're making like a fact-based kind of movie. How difficult was it to try to get these factoids that you know of, these events that you read about, and weave it into a script that can really play itself out in a narrative film?
Well, I mean, you bring up an interesting point. I mean, the Big Short really was very much similar. I mean, I think we would compare ourselves a little more to that because it's also dealing with a complicated topic. It's not just about abortion, but it's about the law and how things are decided and how our Constitution works and how our judicial system works. And almost like the Big Short, it was quite complicated, having also then to weave it into a story. And I think the Big Short used several different storylines and weaved it all together at the end into one. When you're making a movie, it's not, movies are not about events, right? So the Big Short was not really about the stock market crash. Roe v. Wade was not about the decision in the court, the movie, when you see it. The movies are about characters, and you have to tell stories with characters because the audience wants to follow somebody's journey. And go through their journey and feel like they do, or feel for them or against them, or however you want to feel for that character. And that's how you tell a story in a movie. And so we had to weave in, facts through a character who told the story, and we had to use other characters as well, not just him. And because we wanted to tell a story and be as factual as possible, we used pro-choice characters and pro-life characters, and we also didn't really want to vilify anybody, right? We wanted to tell the truth. I don't think anybody was truly evil during this. Everybody was trying to do the best that they thought they could do to win, and they all both sides thought their reason was better. And one side thought they were helping women, the other one thought they were saving lives, and so. It was sort of a very careful weave of having to utilize all characters and not try to vilify anybody, but just lay out the facts and the truth.
The character that you play in the movie is Bernard Nathanson, otherwise known affectionately throughout the film as Bernie. His story is really interesting. He was like a leading activist and also a practitioner. He was a doctor of abortion. I mean, I think he had thousands of abortions done at his hands. Later in his life, he went through a certain conversion, both ideologically and spiritually as well. His story is central. While you have a lot of characters, it's his story that's central to this movie. Excuse me. And he has narration as well that really kind of drives the film. He's kind of like almost like the person who really kind of fills in the gaps there. How did you know that Bernard Nathanson was the character to use to really put central to the story upon which you can really kind of like put together all this kind of like expanding web of players and facts, etc.?
In the beginning, I didn't. He was not the initial protagonist in the movie, and he was a character in the movie, but he wasn't the protagonist. I mean, I wrote the script with a friend of mine, and we struggled to figure out who was going to be our protagonist. I mean, initially, it was a pro-life character, not a pro-choice character. And we went through the different iterations of how we wanted to write the film and from whose point of view. And so, Bernie's story was just so interesting. When we first set out to make the movie, being pro-life myself, I was going to tell a pro-life story from a pro-life point of view. And we wrote that script, and it was fine. It was interesting, but and Bernie kept on standing, although he was a character in there, he wasn't the protagonist. Everybody who read the script, Bernie kept on standing out as sort of the most interesting. And so we went and we decided, why don't we just tell it from the pro-choice point of view? And that's how we told the movie. We told the movie from the pro-choice perspective. And it ends up, Bernie had a conversion and became pro-life. And I thought it was, it ended up becoming a lot more interesting. And when you write a character in a movie, it's always important that your main character has an arc and a change that you follow him through. And that was really with Bernie. But we never really knew. To be quite honest, it really wasn't until the end that Bernie became our protagonist.
You co-direct the film with Kathy Allen. How did the decision come about for you to direct the movie for the first time? This is your directorial debut. And how did you find the experience, considering it's such a big subject? You're dealing with a big cast with huge names, and you're also taking on so many different other responsibilities as well as starring, writing, and producing the film.
The challenge of finding another director, and we spoke to other directors, and the challenge we kept on coming up against was that none of the directors truly understood the characters. Kathy and I had done a year of research. We had read over 40 books and court transcripts and watched interviews. And we wanted to be. It was so important because of how controversial the topic was that we be as honest as we could with who these characters were, where these scenes took place, how people felt, and what was going on in their lives at the time, and how their relationships connected with one another. And for somebody to truly understand that, you weren't just going to get that reading a script. You're going to have to understand the backgrounds of every character in the film. And that would have taken a director months and months, to read and really, truly understand all of it. It took me a year. I'm a slow reader, so maybe it would take, somebody, 6 months to do this. And so Kathy and I just said, nobody really knows this better. We visualized the entire thing when writing it from all the research we've done. So no one else knows what all of this feels like and looks like, but besides us. So that's what we end up directing. And I think it was good that we had a perspective of both a male and a female director and a male and female writer for a storyline that deals with, relationships between men and women. Right. And then I also think, yes, taking on the responsibilities of everything was very challenging. And thank God I had a partner to help me, who directed, the scenes I was in, she directed.
I'd imagine being a director on this film in particular, there'll be such an experience to direct someone like a Jon Voight, who I think, over the years, Jon Voight has really expressed his opinions more in regards to his politics, etc. I think he's been unfairly castigated because of that. In my opinion, he's one of the great American actors of all time. The amount of films that he did, especially in the 70s and 80s, even up to the 2000s, people forget that he was in Ali, that Michael Mann film, and he was almost unrecognizable in that film, and he does great work in Ray Donovan as well. What's it like directing a Jon Voight, directing an actor like that, who I'm sure you have seen in screen so many times and would have admired his work as well?
Much easier than directing the younger ones today. And I'll tell you, John, and not only John, but all of his colleagues who were on the Supreme Court, they all came 10 times more prepared, right? Not only were they prepared because they knew the script and they knew their scenes and they knew their lines, but they knew their characters. John came and started quizzing me. And did you know that Chief Justice Berger did this? And I go, yes, John, I wrote the character. Yes, son. And he was trying to get, catch me like I didn't know what I was doing. And he really understood and knew the character and had done his homework. And to the point where, Chief Justice Berger was a little heavy. Maybe we should, make me a little more stocky. And they really cared and wanted to get into it. So it made it that much easier when the actors were prepared and they knew their roles and they knew their characters.
The thing that's really interesting about your movie, it shows the opposing forces in this one kind of movement. On one end, you have the pro-life side, the other side, the pro-choice. And it talks about the figures I don't think many people know about. I myself certainly did not. Being Australian, I'm not so immersed into American history and American politics as, of course, you would be. But there are certain figures that I was really like, wow, I had no idea about this person. I had to, look them up later. I looked at your fact sheet as well in regards to these characters. One of them being Larry Ladder or Lawrence Ladder, who is portrayed by Jamie Kennedy in the film. He's this guy who's obsessed with Margaret Sanger. He's essentially, I think I heard you call him, or someone called him, was essentially the father of the abortion movement. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have Dr. Milford Jefferson, who was the first Black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School, and she was the president of the National Right to Life Committee, and she's played by Stacey Dash in the movie. When you have characters, these larger-than-life characters like this, how important was it for you to really present that to the audience so they're educated and they know just exactly who is behind a lot of what was going on during these times?
Well, I find it interesting. You made a comment that you don't really know, being Australian, you don't know much about American history. And I'll tell you, Larry Lader and Mildred Jefferson were such important people in American history that no one's, not just you, but no one's ever heard of. I mean, Mildred Jefferson, I'll tell you, we'll start with Mildred. The majority of African Americans in this country who break barriers are put up on a pedestal, revered, talked about constantly. No one's ever heard of Mildred Jefferson. And to at that time, she broke a tremendous amount of barriers. In her hospital, at Boston University Hospital, at Harvard University. She was the first, Black woman to graduate Harvard Medical School. At that period in time, that was tremendously a huge accomplishment, and no one's ever heard of her. And the reason no one's ever heard of her was because she's pro-life and the second president of the National Right to Life. If she was a major pro-choice advocate, you would have heard of her. Larry Lader, I'll tell you the reason you never. So Larry Lader, if you go out and read 50 abortion books, pro-choice, pro-life, you will realize that Larry Lader was the father of the abortion movement. He's really the first guy to write books on the topic. The Supreme Court essentially utilized his books and cited them in their findings in Roe v. Wade. And not just you haven't heard of him, no one's heard of him. And most people in the pro-choice, pro-life movement has never heard of Larry Lader. And the reason you've never, and this is sort of just an opinion, so take this for what it's worth. The reason I believe that no one's heard of Larry Lader is that because if you give Larry the credit for abortion in America, you have to take it away from the women's movement. And I think, because then everyone's heard of, Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug, and so these are very famous women's rights activists that everybody has heard of. Betty Friedan, who's in our movie, and essentially everybody assumes or thinks or that abortion is legalized because of the women's rights movement in America. And yes, they were a tool that got it there, but it really was Larry Lader. And I think if you give if the credit goes to Larry, you got to take it away from the women. And I think that's probably why you've never heard of Larry Lader. But that's just, I'm just speculating on that.
There's a scene in the movie and it features a song, and the song, the lyrics or the title of the song is "There is a Fortune from Abortion." And when this scene came up, it was almost kind of like surreal, kind of like I didn't know how to take it because it just seemed like such a surreal thing to me. As I was like, well, there's no way that could have been real, but that was a real song. How did you come across that song? Where did that first came into your kind of your reading, your research into this? And once you did find that bit of info, were you like, well, look, we got to have that song in the movie because it's just too in one way too surreal, another way too weird, and another way, I think it speaks quite a lot about where both of these characters are coming from in their approach to the abortion issue.
Yeah, I mean, we found it in Bernard, one of Bernard Nathanson's book. I think it was Aborting America, and if you watch the movie through the epilogue, you'll see that we bring that up, and we show exactly what page that came from that book. That was a song that the residents used to sing in school when Bernard was in medical school, and it was like, I mean, it was just, I mean, you hear the lyrics. I mean, it's a shockingly ridiculous that this was going on. And so it was just too cinematic not to put this in the movie. We had to do it.
A lot of things that are going on now in the last several years is the, I would say the emergence of fake news, but as clearly as your film shows, fake news has been around for quite some time now. And what's really interesting is how Nathanson and later kind of fed the media fake stats in regards to illegal abortions, etc., to kind of get the narrative on their side. It was really kind of like a shrewd, almost kind of like a tactical kind of game they were playing there. And of course, the media reported it to a really kind of ignorant public, and they ate it up, and then it got fueled into the entertainment industry and the media, and it just turned into this big kind of thing. When people watch your movie and they see the kind of tactics used, especially regards to peddling fake statistics in the media and how the media were more than happy to present these fake statistics, how much of a revelation do you think this will be? Or do you think that, considering the things that have happened over the last years, people will not be so shocked to find that, hey, there's a lot of bullshit going on in regards to what's happening in the media?
Yeah, I mean, over the last couple of years, I think that everyone's sort of fed up and have recognized everything. And I think what's interesting is people are looking at this being like, wow, this is not new, right? This has been going on for 50 years. And it's just now that we're learning about it because there's so many different outlets. Social media is allowing us to be able to find the truth and see the other side. Back then, if Time magazine came out and said, 50% of women are having abortions in America, like without Twitter, Facebook, the internet, computers, maybe just 2 or 3 other periodicals, how do you oppose that, right? How do you make sure that that's correct, right, or wrong? You just believe what you read. And so I think Time, with the fact that we're finding all this out now doesn't negate the fact that it was probably worse 50 years ago because there was nobody to fact check you. The public wasn't fact checking you, and there were no other outlets to fact check you. So I think it's just, a revelation, and that people are going to be shocked about that. But I don't think it's going to really, as you mentioned, I don't think it's going to be a tremendous impact on people being upset about it because, we live it on a daily basis today with fake news.
My first question, I mentioned that making a project like this, there was no doubt you'll receive scrutiny, that you have heat coming your way. Were you surprised, though, at the amount of resistance and scrutiny that you did get? I mean, I've heard of read reports, and I heard some interviews you had before about how, there were occasions where locations were being denied, cast and crew. Not a big number. I think people putting too much emphasis. Any production will have hundreds of people of it, and I think you only lost maybe a dozen or so, maybe less than that. But still, there were circumstances where some people left the project, get publications, not only writing derogatory kind of articles, but there were physical altercations that journalists had with your cast, with your crew during filming. When these things happen, are you at all surprised by the vitriol coming your way, or did you say to yourself, this is we're dealing with a movie here that's going to bring about big emotions, and we got to be ready for these things to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I can, I knew it was going to happen. To some of the extents, that haven't become public yet. I just was sort of a little bit shocked that certain organizations would have the blatantly falsify documents and completely lie about stuff that are huge, respectable organizations, and that they could really get into trouble over this. And so, and you'll find, at some point, well, that'll come out. It just can't come out right now. But some of it was a little bit shocking. All the minuscule stuff, sure. But that happens on, listen, I tell everybody, it happens on every movie, whether it's pro-choice or it's a horror flick or a comedy. The most ridiculous thing, is the news, and it's great because they're just giving us more press. To come out and saying these guys had a script and it was a hidden script and they shot it under a secret name. Well, guess what? So does every single Marvel movie, every single DC movie shoots with secret scripts under the name. But the media doesn't go, Spider-Man's not going to be called Spider-Man today. It's the secret script, and so, it's the same thing everybody else does. We're just getting a little more attention about it.
I think something that's going on right now is that, has been going on for a while, is the culture war. And I think what is happening now more than ever is that there are filmmakers now, there are producers now, maybe not big time movie studios, but definitely like maybe smaller indie studios, kind of fighting back. I don't know if you saw the news from a few months ago. The Daily Wire have put their foot into the entertainment sphere now. They're making their own movies. Salem Now have been making movies for a little while now. Do you think that a lot of people out there are kind of sick of one of the biases that's happening within the entertainment industry, especially the film industry, and are now putting their money and their efforts where their mouth is and really want to make the movies that are important to them and fight back against what is no doubt in my mind a really kind of collaborator kind of event from one side of the political spectrum to really kind of like silence voices more from the conservative side of things?
Yeah, I applaud that there's some people trying to get together, but there's really no real true movement into pop culture today. It's from very small sources that are trying to do it. Me trying to scrape money together to make ROE. And yes, they'll have to just try to silence anybody who doesn't agree with them. And I think it's sort of ironic the party that's supposed to be the more open-minded is the party that's the most closed off to anybody else's mindset beside their own. But anyway, there's neither here nor there. I think the challenge is, though, the media is completely controlled by the left, whether it's the news or entertainment today. 99% of it is controlled by the left. And so we don't have a voice until some billionaire has the courage to come and buy a movie studio. And even if they did that, we would still be like, 1/5 of the voice today. And so I just don't see that happening because the conservatives have just never understood how to utilize pop culture or the media. There's only really been one guy who understood how to do it. He became president of the United States. And he became president of the United States, I'm talking about Trump, because he knew how to use pop culture and the media. And that's what got him elected. And the conservative movement today still doesn't get it or understand it. They still want to have galas and preach to themselves. They want to do movies that only preach about their things that they like and they want to their own people. And, that doesn't work. You need to make sort of, broader type movies, which is one of the reasons I try not to make it hit you over the head, faith-based, you're right, I'm wrong type of movie. That doesn't work. And so I try to be open, have a movie that would open some hearts and minds and allow people that are maybe, somewhere in the middle of the road on the issue to come in and take a look.
So for everyone out there listening, Roe v. Wade releases April 2 on digital. People could go to a really cool website, actually, roeVWademovie.com. It's got places where give people options as well, Nick, to actually host a virtual screening, which is pretty cool, or a screening in their location, or even host a theater screening. It's got resources. It's got a fact check page. Nick, I imagine that considering all the scrutiny that was coming your way in all the things that were happening during production, post-production, et cetera, that putting a fact check giver is a really effective way to kind of counter against what I'm sure might be claims against the film about this, that, or the other. Was the fact check kind of thing something that was always in the cards? Was that something that kind of came about after you had to deal with certain publications?
No, it was a bunch of, it was some folks that were in the pro-life movement that came to us and they wanted to put this together for us and do it. I think it's interesting. It's nice. I don't know necessarily if it's going to be helpful for multiple reasons. I think it stops the media from criticizing us, which is not always a good thing. I mean, sometimes we want the media to criticize us. It gives us media, right? So, number two, I don't think it also really matters at the end of the day because the media is going to lie regardless. They're going to tell it. They're going to say we lied and made stuff up, regardless of how many, facts or proof or books or we put in front of them. I love to tell the story of the Daily Beast. I mean, the Daily Beast wrote an article about how we lied about Margaret Sanger. Now, Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood. And if you Google her and read about her, and read her own autobiography, she was a eugenicist. And an admitted eugenicist.
Not to mention that recently she's actually been cancelled by the very same pro-choice people once supported her. So that goes a long way as well.
Well, yeah, great. And it's interesting because they said, well, Nick Loeb made out Margaret Sanger to be a racist. And although she was a eugenicist, she was definitely not a racist. So Nick Loeb lied in his portrayal of Margaret Sanger. I mean, you can't make this up. I mean, you don't understand. You cannot be a eugenicist without being a racist, right? I mean, it's like, so I mean, the fact sheets at the end of the day really don't mean anything.
Well, for everyone out there listening, April 2, Roe v. Wade, people recommend to check this movie out. Learn something about recent American history. Like I said, Jon Voight, Corbin Burnson, Jamie Kennedy, a bunch of well-known names in the movie. In Nick Loeb, you star in it too, your directorial debut. Congratulations to you with the film and best of luck with the upcoming release.
Thank you so much for your time today.